Hi everyone, I'm Giulia, and our group will be discussing hyperlocal assistance for regenerative agriculture. So our aim was to answer the question, how can we expand the reach and effectiveness of educational programs and peer-to-peer farmer networks to facilitate the spread of regenerative agriculture? So we began by mapping out the current state of educational programs and peer-to-peer networks. What is the agricultural network? What agricultural networks already exist? On which digital platforms are these networks located? What educational programs and information are currently available to farmers, etc. So popular examples of digital platforms we found include YouTube, Facebook, ag socials, online forums like Ag Talk, Reddit has a few threads, and other groups and websites, Rodale Institute, Young Farmers Coalition, Farmers Union as well. And so from here, next slide. From here, we transitioned our focus to understanding the reach and effectiveness of these platforms. So we created a survey and shared it on the various platforms we came across in our research. And in a little over a week, we received 72 responses and not too many people giving us troll responses, so that was great. And the results came in predominantly from the US, where we found that the most trusted sources of information came from other farmers. People trusted in-person events and peer-to-peer word of mouth most. And that the information that is available is too abundant, it's not locally relevant, it's biased, and it's outdated. So these findings ultimately led us to understand the critical need for hyperlocal resources.
So these survey results showed us that there's a wealth of information. There's essentially too many places to get information. If a producer is going to take on the risk of implementing a new practice, they need trustworthy knowledge and ideally from somebody who's actually done it. Producers need solutions specific to their operation, like to the geography, to their operational goals, and to their finances. So for example, if you're putting on a cover crop for the first time, you need to know what will work best for your climate and your soil, what mix to plant, what equipment will be needed, and how you're going to pay for it. The best people to give that advice is someone who's gone through that process of transition, ideally your neighbor. Next slide. So we envisioned these small hubs that connect a successful regenerative producer to nearby producers who want to transition but don't have the resources. These hubs are where regenerative hopefuls could learn from each other and share ideas and lessons learned and maybe even share equipment and crucially show off their successes. We quickly realized that this hub model we were envisioning is a lot like the Grange or a co-op or just a village, whatever it is, it already exists, but there's still problems that need to be addressed. There's too much information to sift through. There's so much risk involved with changing practices, and we need a way to make it extremely easy to help these producers take the plunge and adopt regenerative practices. Next slide, please. So plugging into existing networks may provide that little nudge. Our simple model would share success stories of producers who've been through it and come out on the other side, put together that local knowledge, like the most common crops and pests and diseases and treatments, and then show those success stories in person where people tend to learn the most and where they get the most benefit and make those crucial connections. But of course, that may not always be feasible. So there has to be knowledge sharing online in easy to consume ways. So this is the way that ag extension would ideally work if they had more of a budget. So we want to plug into existing networks and encourage the adoption of these practices and motivate with stories and support with actual helpful tailored resources. So a group or a hub of potential adopters connect to that local technical assistance and funders, such as the Ag Extension or NRCS, but also they have the resources available to empower them to go further. Like the people, the plan, and the funds that are particular to their needs and their concerns. Next slide, please. Like the template to follow. Yeah, a template to follow. So we put together a few sample starter packs for specific production sectors in areas that would make a big impact on carbon drawdown. So Iowa corn and soy, and cotton in the Texas Panhandle, and livestock in the arid West. These starter packs list the people that can offer the technical assistance and the planning resources and the grant and loan options. And they'll come with those success stories of the nearby regenerative farmer. So big picture vision is that there's a template that regenerative adopters can follow, where the hub is a successful regenerative practitioner and the others are molding those methods to their own operations with applicable support. And Will tell us about those success stories.
Next slide, please. All right, so let's make this model a bit more concrete. So here are two farmers who were working their land conventionally and then switched to regenerative agriculture, and therefore would kind of be the ideal candidates for setting up these hubs and spreading it throughout their community. So the first one we have here is Russell Hendrick, who's in North Carolina. He was actually a brand new farmer, and despite neighbors and universities telling him that essentially to go conventional and that cover crops were a waste of time, he decided to do regenerative agriculture because the starting up costs were a lot less. You don't need as much fertilizer and you don't need to till. So he switched to regenerative agriculture, and by using livestock and diverse cover crops, he actually increased his yields so much that they were like 300 bushels of corn per acre versus the county average that was like 230. So he definitely improved his profitability a lot, and also the land improved as the more carbon was sequestered in the soil. The second example we have here is Joe and Ryan Bruschi. They're actually a father-son partnership, and they're in a county in Montana, which is it's a very semi-arid environment. So it's very sandy soils. So they're always like a couple of weeks away from drought. So it's very difficult to farm there. They switched to some regenerative practices, planting cover crops, and they're allowing their cows to graze on it during the winter. And then that kind of improved their land. And when drought hit in 2017, they were having bales of wheat per acre versus their neighbors who were only having bushels of wheat per acre. So their neighbors started to really take notice of this. And that's the key point, right? We want these regenerative farmers to be the influencers in their local county, just to try and convert more of those neighbors to regenerative agriculture. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the key forces in agriculture, which is often missed, is the university extension agents. So these agents are the people that do scientific research for the various crops or fertilizers or whatever in a specific region. And they also are very trusted, have a very trusted relationship with the farmer. So they disseminate that information to the farmers. And we actually saw that in our survey results, that many farmers really do trust their ag extension agents. However, you can see from this slide, this is in Hendry County, Florida, where there is $500 million of value of agricultural products. There is one extension agent for this, so he's a very, very busy person. And we can see the first one here, Gene, was actually going above and beyond to help his community. He sent out newsletters to them, and these newsletters were 20-page PDFs from everything from like different seeds to what diseases were in the area, very helpful. But a big PDF is kind of problematic to manage. When he retired and Craig took over, Craig started using more modern tools like MailChimp and certain web pages to actually make this information much more, graspable. But so if we could modernize more of these practices, so more regenerative or more university extension agents use these methods and then integrated it into their community, this would be very beneficial. Next slide, please. So this is where it all comes together. So if we had the successful regenerative farmers come to these meetings and head the meetings, if we had the university agents come to these meetings, and if we had the local community who we're going to bring out, because as we all learned in college and in high school, you need to bring food to events in order for people to come at all. We think probably barbecue and beer is the best bet here. So if we all get them to come to these events and talk about and disseminate their different experiences farming in their very local area of their county, and also have an online component as well so that they can keep going with the conversation, we think that would be the ideal way to spread regenerative agriculture throughout their county and hopefully throughout the country. Next slide, please. So what would be the next steps if we really wanted to do this? Well, we would first try and locate the few specific locations, specific counties where there are regenerative farmers who we can build a strong relationship with, and then hopefully convince them and pay them for their time of starting these little hubs in their communities. Once we have a couple of these going, maintaining, and they are correctly they are correctly converting the neighborhood to regenerative agriculture, then we would want to scale up this model. We would do this most likely by contacting existing ag organizations to partner with and leverage their networks, as we would then have a proven model. Next slide, please. So these are some very respected ag organizations in America. Hopefully, with partnering with them, once we already have a proven model, this would scale out nationally, and hopefully we could get more people to do regenerative agriculture and sequester more carbon in the soil and improve farmers' quality of life overall. Thank you.